Hello YouTube, my name is Mark. This is Nixon Motorsports. This channel is all about motorsports, from racing to exotic cars and even simulators. Today's video, we're going to do a teardown and reassembly of an Xtrac 6-speed sequential gearbox. Now, I had Champ cars a couple years ago, and I needed to service them, you know, gear changes, you know, dog rings and so on, very typical things, right? And I was fortunate enough to have one of the Walker Racing engineers who worked on gearboxes actually do this tutorial video for me. So I thought, you know what, I should put this online for other racers out there that would benefit from this as well. So that's what this video is about. The video quality is a little okay, but just keep track, keep watching it. You'll find a lot of very good information from this video. All right, with that, let's get into it.
This is Keith Beck. He's a gearbox mechanic for Fast Racing, and he was with Walker Racing for a long time. He built the box that's in your car now. And we have a 2001 Xtrac gearbox up here on this stand, and Keith is in the process of removing the cover plate to get to gears 3rd through 6th. So of course you'll have to remove anything that might be in the way of these side panels. The underwing should not have to be off the car for this. Oil level could be an issue if your oil level is a little high. Sometimes what teams did is either they drained a little out or they tipped the car a little to the side in order to change like a 3rd through 6th gear on this side. They would just tip the car in order to keep the oil from draining out once you pulled the side cover. And you want to do this when the car is super hot, so you can just burn the hell out of yourself. That's what Keith is used to, but so that cover plate allows you to get to the nut on the main shaft.
So we get our main shaft socket.
So there's a main shaft socket that's a specialty tool made by Xtrac.
Just a short extension. And that's just a wrench.
It's a welded on wrench onto a tube.
On a tube. So you're holding the nut and you're undoing the main shaft, turning the main shaft. Oh, look at that one. Right hand thread.
The right hand thread on that, Mark.
$160 foot-pounds.
Any Loctite? You don't use Loctite on that because it has a retaining clip.
Yeah, exactly. No Loctite.
You see how he lays everything out into a muffin pan. Those are a pretty good way of keeping all of the little nuts and spacers and things separated.
1032 jacking screws in those 3 positions. QJ spacer bearing. the other side of the bearing. Spacer. Setting shim. Lay shaft spacer. Lay shaft 6 gear. Main shaft 6.
And as Keith lays those out into the pan, he lays those gears, I think, in a way that kind of keeps them in order. Obviously the gears are marked pretty well, but it is kind of nice to have them laid out in a way that is in order so you don't have to dig.
This is your selector rail here. It's locked in.
There's a little keyway, or so flat on the end of that kind of helps position that.
Stops it from rotating.
And keeps it from rotating. Obviously oil flows up through the center of that rod. When you pull that out, you will hear the forks drop away from the barrel. And if you're only changing 3rd through 6th and you want to pull that rod out, you really don't want to pull it all the way out. You only want to pull it out far enough to drop the forks away from the hub. If you pull it all the way out, then you'll be forced to get into 1st and 2nd side to get the fork back into position.
There's 5th gear. Spacer. Lay shaft 5th.
He just stacks the gears up in order, and then they go back in order. Just keeps it kind of simple.
Another lay shaft spacer.
The lay shaft spacers are the same width, so if you did get those confused, it wouldn't necessarily matter. Is that right?
Yes. So they space that gap there on the lay shaft.
Right. Yep. So these gears are coming off the main shaft now with the
4th
center
gear,
hub.
main shaft. 3rd gear, main shaft.
And these dog rings are the same from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, 5th, 6th, and so are the forks and the center hubs and the bearings. So if that got confused for any reason, you wouldn't have to.
Yeah, that's all the same.
You wouldn't get concerned about that.
Top gear stuff. Reach in. You pull out your reverse idler, main shaft reverse idler. And this is a critical spacer. Sets your barrel and main shaft location.
Yeah, that is a machine spacer, and on your build sheet for the gearbox that we sent to you, that dimension is on that build sheet.
Lay shaft reverse and oil pump drive, and that goes that way into the bearing.
Yeah, have a look at that because it's stepped.
Doesn't
It's
go
stepped.
that way. It goes
sorry
that
about
way.
that. Yep.
Yeah. And come over to this side.
I'm probably not going to win any awards for filming, so don't submit this video to any film festivals or anything. Mark, Keith, do these side covers have any trouble with those nuts backing off like the Lola did at all?
No, no.
Okay.
But I would torque these to 150 inch-pounds.
Okay. Those little captured washer 5/16 jet nuts be torqued to 150 inch-pounds.
And this cover here is the incorrect cover. It should have a snout on here. We're just trying to find one.
Okay.
And circlips.
So those little locking discs that live behind those circlips, you have to kind of, once you torque the nut, you have to sort of rotate those into place, don't you, to
Yes.
find the correct locking rotation or
Yeah.
indexing.
Yeah, they index in just one position. You just got to find that.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've got this socket here. That's the main shaft socket again,
Go over here so I can get.
which goes on there. Oh, sorry, on the main shaft, on there.
Is that the same socket from the other side?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so is this one. This is the same socket again on the other side, which will go inside the main shaft on this side.
Okay. To hold the main shaft.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we can. So right hand thread again. 160 foot-pounds. The same nut on both sides.
Okay.
Now this one here, for the lathe shaft, you have that thing there. Well, this is your one, Russ, that you had.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing. So that then, it's the original Reynard piece. That fits in there. This big socket won't go that way. It goes in that way like that.
Okay.
So that then locks the lathe shaft. And there's another socket, which is a smaller socket for the lathe shaft nut. Goes on there. Right hand thread again. This is also 160. And this has a QJ bearing on there, which basically same jacking screws on the other side. Bit dark on this side, Russ.
Mm-hmm. A little bit of light coming through the window too.
Oh yeah, make it worse.
It's okay. I'm sure he's going to get the idea of all this, and
Right.
this is something Xtrac didn't provide to the teams. The teams just found out. A little bit of instruction.
Yeah. Inside cover. Other half of the QJ bearing. Try and keep them on the same side. There's the opposite left hand preload spacer. First gear. Checking. Now pull the rail all the way out.
That allows that, see that fork drop down out of the housing? The gearbox housing has a place for those forks to ride up inside.
This is a half hub arrangement. Same fork as on the other side. Second gear, which is notice a little bit wider. Second gear hub, basically, is a split hub.
It makes up the second half of that hub arrangement. That's only on the first and second side.
Exactly. And then pull that locking device. Here's your load shaft with your bevel gear on.
So if he has to change first and second lay shaft, then it's you would be required to remove the bevel gear from the lay shaft.
Yes, which has a locking ring on there. Then I have a socket here. Goes down, grabs hold of that nut.
Put that into the vise.
Put that into the vise. And use that one here as a socket to undo it.
Is right hand or left hand thread?
This here is a right hand thread.
Okay. Okay, and then you don't need to pull the main shaft out. The main shaft can stay right in there for gear changes.
Yes.
There's no reason to pull that out.
No, there's nothing more on the main shaft. It's just a solid shaft. So the bearing runs straight on here on this model.
You just want to inspect occasionally for pitting in the root of the tooth.
Yeah.
On the main shaft and on the crown wheel or the ring gear. At times, they don't typically have too much of a problem though, do they?
No, they're pretty good.
The bevels sometimes do though. You see the bevel gear in this gearbox. Sometimes you have to keep an eye on the bevel gears for pitting trouble. Okay, let me stop this for a second, and then we'll get started again in a second.
Start on the low gear side.
This is the reassembly, Mark.
So just low gear side.
Now, of course, Mark, you won't have the tail cover off of the car, and you won't have the differential out. You'll just be working through the sides. This is just a gearbox that we're in the process of putting together.
So, second gear hub with bearing.
Onto the main shaft.
Have a step out. And that locates up into the barrel.
You know, I should have asked Keith is what gear the box really should be in neutral.
Neutral, yeah, definitely a neutral, yeah.
Put the box in neutral before you begin the gear change.
Yeah, that's important. So the barrel is all neutral all the way through.
Yeah.
So the selector is now, the fork is in position of the barrel, and the selector will go straight through. I push it all the way in, so it keeps it in there. First gear. Preload spacer. And the other half of the QJ.
Just light oil. If you have a little light oil as you assemble, it's not a bad idea. Gearbox oil.
Yeah, it's just gearbox lube. O-ring there. Reverse. Oh, sorry, Russ.
It's okay. Get the persuader. We have the wrench for him.
Okay.
Wait, hundreds of times you think you've done that?
Boy.
All the years working on the Reynard. And of course this Reynard stuck around for a while, so
It did.
it would be pretty common to have to change gears after just about every session.
Tap your main shaft all the way through there. Main shaft nut. Start that into the floating bearing. Other half of the QJ. Nut straight on, there's no overwash or anything. Then we do our sockets again. Main shaft socket on there. Torque wrench at 160. That socket there.
That goes into the right hand side of the main shaft.
Yeah. Wrench on there.
Now obviously when this is in the car you'll have to come from a more vertical sort of a height with your tooling. You won't be able to go directly from the back like this, but you don't have to pull the suspension off or anything like that. It's just a matter of repositioning the tools.
Right. Sometimes that bearing, like it's done now, will get hung up on there. So you have to oh, wrong one. get a little steel punch, just tap around.
There you go. See how the threads became more exposed on the main shaft? There we go.
That's better. To the main shaft.
Okay, that locates the main shaft in this bearing, so it essentially doesn't float back and forth.
Well,
it does float some.
It does have a bit of float. See the float?
Yeah.
Now, what positions the main shaft is this
That
side.
one. Okay.
But it can just float here, like it does,
Yeah.
which is fine. Right now, not fine if it's right. So then we get a locking mechanism on the lay shaft side again. It'll either go one way or the other.
Okay.
And this socket here is the smaller of all the spline sockets. 160 foot.
Of course, it's being held by the right-hand side plate, so 160 foot-pounds, right-hand threads.
Yeah. This locking device goes in lay shaft. You just feel when it lines out, there it goes all the way in.
Mind your weight, Keith.
No, you're fine. Spin your circlip. This is the difficult one to get in, Russ.
You have to just play with the rotation until you
Yeah.
get it to line up to the proper index.
You know when it's in. Here we go, it fell on then. So, splines into the main shaft and then into the spline there. You'll know when it's in.
Yeah, it'll be nice and flat against the end of the main shaft.
Exactly. If it's not in, the circlip won't go in. And the circlip, if it's not in, the circlip won't spin.
Yeah, and that's just a good way to be sure that circlip is down in place in the groove.
Front cover on, lay shaft cover. It only goes one way. Well, actually goes two ways. Missing one nut.
That's okay.
And this is the incorrect cover for this one. It's a big
So once you're done on first and second side, the left-hand side of the box, you can put both of these covers on and be finished with this side?
Yes.
Okay.
Except for one thing, is the selector rail.
Yes.
So then grab hold of the selector rail, reach from the other side, don't pull it all the way out, pull it as far as the middle bulkhead, that far there.
That's right. If you pull it again too far, then you'll have to get back into this side because the fork will, of course, drop back down.
Exactly. Then we start assembly on this side. Start with that little spacer that goes towards the bearing that way.
And again, yeah, just be sure it's stepped, and you want that small diameter to go against the pump.
Then the reverse gear idler and oil pump drive. The setting spacer on the main shaft. Reverse gear. Main
And
shaft reverse.
Does that have a, is that sided?
Yeah, it's got a step.
You see a step that goes in?
That goes in. Then we can start with third gear lay shaft. Third gear main shaft.
Yeah, you see that nub at the top of the fork? That, of course, goes up and goes into the slot on the barrel, so that has to be facing upwards.
Right. That locates into the barrel. Goes all the way in there. All by feel. You feel it go in, then reach over, pull the selector rail into it, locates into the fork, then it won't fall out. First lay shaft spacer.
And there are two of those, and they are the same.
Yes. Put fourth gear lay shaft. Fourth gear. Now we can go for fifth. Put that on there. Fifth gear lay shaft first. Always put numbers out. And then the fifth gear main shaft. You won't get the lay shaft in with this in. Lay shaft gear in with this in. You must go through.
Okay, so lay shaft gears are first.
Feel it fall into place. Push that all the way through. The second lay shaft spacer. Sixth gear lay shaft. Sixth gear main. Setting spacer, or preload setting spacer. And main shaft spacer. Lay shaft spacer. And we've got our first QJ that goes on there. This sets the height of the main shaft. It's got a spacer bearing. Remember to put this in. goes on. That goes on there. I always put it in here.
Okay. Yeah,
you
because
lift
if you
out
try
very
to,
many times, a lot of times, you lift in the tray.
yeah, if you try to the other way around, it can catch the edge of that bearing race on one of those bearings, and it doesn't necessarily want to go in place very well.
Yeah.
It's got a nice little radius step here to help guide that lay shaft onto it.
Penske lifted out onto Farron's car at Elkhart Lake, 99 or 2000 or something. Make sure those O-rings are in.
Yeah, there's O-rings in the case there that help the oiling come across into the side cover.
Little soft tap. Put the nuts on. And then got our other side of our QJ bearing. And sometimes get hung up as well. Make sure it's seated in the bearing, the ball of the bearing. Start the nut. Get this set up again. That same 2 sockets. The big wrench I dropped. This is right hand. But you're tightening up the main shaft, so you still a right hand nut, but you're pulling the main shaft onto the nut. 160 foot-pound. And you've got the locking mechanism. No. Yes.
Oh, it's quick
Went
one.
straight in.
Yeah.
And make sure you can spin it without the diff and the whole thing can mix Ross.
Yeah.
Make sure you spin it, that's good. And the cover. This can only be careful, it can go on like that.
You miss one.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that concludes
Yep.
about
that's it.
45 minutes of gear change. I would just take your time and have a manual laid out as well for a gearbox manual if you need it, because obviously the exploded view manual of the gearbox shows where all of these spacers go and if you get confused, but take your time disassembling and lay the things out in the tray in order, and that certainly does help. And that's about it. Thanks, Mark.
Hey, just a couple quick news items just to keep you updated. About a year ago, we put down a deposit on the new 22 Lotus Emira. Just an update on that itself. The V6 Toyota power plant cars are just starting in production. Actually, I think it's September, so in a couple weeks. We ordered, however, the AMG Turbo 4-cylinder with the double clutch transmission package, and the production in those cars, the Emira with that powertrain, they're saying it's roughly Q1 2023. So it is what it is. We're looking forward to that thing. But that's the update on the Lotus Emira. And one other item, I'm still queued up to go out to Paul Ricard in France, and I was going to do that this year if you saw videos about that, and now I'll be doing that in 2023. This is clearly a huge bucket list item for me. I'll be driving a relatively modern Formula One race car with the Alpine F1 team there. That's their home track. Their engineers and crew members and such will be there for that. But I'll be doing that roughly around May. I think it's the target in 23. And so that's still on. I just want to let you know that. And obviously I'll bring you along and show as much video as I can through that experience. Okay? Well, that's it for today. I hope you found this video informative, useful. And if you would consider subscribing to this channel, I would appreciate that very much. We're trying to get to our 1,000 minimum subscribers, relatively new channel, but if you would contribute to that, I would appreciate that. Of course, if you have comments, ideas, thoughts, please send those in through the comment section. I have a lot of tutorial type of videos coming out, so I think you'll find some of that of interest. And that's it for today's video, though. So until next time, all right? Ciao.